Hey everyone, welcome to this special July 4th episode of Bridging Generations in Sales and Outreach. I'm your host, Butch Nicholson, and we're going to do something a little different this week. Uh, First, just wish a happy 4th of July for those of us in America, the founding of our country. Somebody from Britain pointed out to me it's the 4th of July everywhere. So I hope you have a great 4th of July, whatever the part of the world you're in. Uh, so instead of having a guest this week, I just want to talk about some of the highlights. I'll mention a few things that we're going to talk about going forward. And just have a good, probably 15, 20-minute show. One of the things I would ask you to do, and I'm going to ask you again at the end, but please share this with the people you work with, your peers, your clients. There's something that everybody can learn from this, whether young or old. The world has changed. The sales world has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. Two really interesting stats from McKinsey are that the average B2B buyer now is 49 years old. I'm sorry, 39 years old. 39 years old. My daughter is 39 years old. So I'm 69 years old. So we have to learn, those of us who've been around for a long time, we know, like, and trust. We know about that, but we don't know the new tools as much as we should, or we're afraid of the new tools. And that's one of the things that we talk about on our show, how we take the old school wisdom and blend it with new school tools and techniques. The other thing that's interesting about the buyer's journey for those of us who've been in sales for a while is the average buyer does 75% of their research now before they want to engage with a salesperson. So what does that mean? Back in the day when I started in sales, the only place a buyer could get information was from a salesperson. Well, they don't need us for the information now. So the way that we become the preferred seller to a buyer has changed. And this is what I want you to remember. It's still about know, like, and trust. People want to deal with people that they know, like, and trust, and they want to know, like, and trust you before they care if you can help them. And they want to know that you can help them before they are willing to give you their time and to buy from you. So we've had some great guests so far this year. This is where I'm going to have to use my notes a little bit. I apologize for that. We've had 14 shows so far. The first one was me, so there have been 13 shows since then. And there have been really 4 key topics that we've had. The first one is relationship-driven prospecting in a digital world. And we started the show off with a good friend of mine, Jeff Watts. And Jeff is, I don't know how old Jeff is. He's probably in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. And he was in digital television for years and was very successful, had a great job. Well, digital TV just ended. I mean, it just went away. It was no longer the platform with streaming and all the different platforms they are now. So he had to reinvent himself. And he did something that I really admire. It was very different. Jeff taught himself TikTok. Started posting. He did TikTok videos that he posted on TikTok and on LinkedIn. And the long and the short of the story is he wound up with the ideal job, the job that he had always wanted. And when he got that job in the streaming side of television, they told him that they would pay for it, but they wanted him to keep doing the TikTok and LinkedIn videos. So it does work. A second guest that we had was Sarah Ann Wildgoose. And Sarah Ann has been a good friend of mine for a long time and actually worked for me for a while. And what Sarah Ann talked about was emphasizing branding that communicates visually just at a glance. In this new digital world, people are going to look at something for 5-10 seconds and then they're gone. In fact, 10 seconds is probably long. So you have to understand what you need to do visually to accentuate your brand. And then last was my good friend Andrew Brummer. And those of you who were on the show last week heard Andrew, but he had a fascinating story. Andrew moved to the U.S. to take a particular job with a friend of his, and his friend came to him about a year ago and said, "Andrew, I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure we're going to make it, and you need to find something else to do." So he was new to the country, and he didn't have a job. And what Andrew did was amazing. He put his nose to the grindstone. He really worked hard. He connected with over 5,000 people on LinkedIn. He has 5,000 followers in less than a year. But that's not really what's important. You can pick up followers on LinkedIn with paid ads and doing some tricks and manipulating the algorithm. But this is what was amazing about what he did. He had meaningful conversations, as he defined it, by 593 of those people. And of those 593 people, he's been able to either directly help over 180 of them, or they have been able to directly help him. So what we talk about with LinkedIn, with social media platforms, it does work. You've got to work it, but it does work. One of the most interesting guests that we had on the show was my good friend Catherine Knott. And Catherine is a therapist, and she talked about the neuroscience behind the brain and how people make decisions, and especially how they make buying decisions. And if you read The Jolt Effect, you would know this, but she really went into it and had a great perspective. But the number one objection we get in our business at Fist Bump is, "I don't have time." But one of the things we've learned is it's not really that they don't have time. It's, "I don't know how to do it, and it scares the crap out of me, so I'm not going to do it." And it's two things that they talked about in the Jolt Effect. It's either the fear of missing out or the fear of messing up. And one of the interesting things, and this is something that I was able to share a personal story of my own sales. People are more scared in the buying decision of messing up than they are of missing out. They'd rather miss out than mess up. And I'll give you just a quick version of the short story I shared. The biggest deal that I ever put together was generated over $1 million in commissions. I did not get all those. I had to bring in a lot of other people. But total, when everybody got paid, it generated over $1 million in commissions. It took us over 3 years to make that sale. But an interesting thing happened. They just kept stalling and stalling and stalling. And we were dealing with the CFO, and we couldn't figure out, what we were missing. And we stayed in contact. We were doing all the things we were supposed to do. And he retired. New CFO came in. He was a younger guy. I met with him the first time, and we talked about what they had and what we were doing for him. And then he asked me, "Why don't we have this?" And this is what we have been trying to sell them for 3.5 years. And a month later, they had it. And what we saw in retrospect, because the CFO was retiring, he didn't want to mess up because he wasn't going to benefit from it, which makes sense. That's human nature. That doesn't make him bad or wrong. And he may not have even realized that. But in the neuroscience, that's what was going on there. Terry Roca had a great story. And I didn't know this. I didn't know very little about the real estate, the residential real estate business. I bought a house or two, but that's about it. But until the late 90s, everything was really, for a long period of time, everything was driven by Zillow. And where Terry got all of her leads, all of her sales went directly back to Zillow. And uh, Zillow had to stop doing what they were doing that were generating those sales. So what Terry learned is that it really had to be about her reputation, and she really had to focus on the know, like, and trust, because you look at most people, the probably the biggest purchase they ever make is their house. And she gave us a very honest account of the challenges of that and what she's been through and how much she enjoys her business today, because she's dealing with people that she likes instead of people that are sent to her by an outside source. Uh, the other person that we had is Bob Tinsley, and Bob works with in the M&A space with uh, mainly entrepreneurs, solopreneurs who are selling a business. In most cases, it's somebody who started a business. They've worked in it for 30, 40 years, and really all their wealth is in that business. And they have to, they get ready to sell and they really don't know what to do. And Bob talked about mindset over mechanics. And he said sellers must think like buyers long before it's time to sell, and that they needed to shift their tactics from perspective, well, to perspective, just not tactics. So we had two guests in a row who are good friends of mine. One is Dean Nolly, and the other is Kristen Hendricks, and they both talked about trends and structure and scaling in a smart way. And Dean pointed out to us on the show that most businesses under $50 million don't have a documented sales process. And that's a problem. So they're out there just kind of, hoping the next thing works. And what we tend to do when we don't have a process is we focus on the product, and people don't buy a product until they believe that product is going to solve a problem. And a process gives you that. And Kristen has a really interesting position. She is one of the managing partners of a CPA firm, a good-sized CPA firm, and she is not a CPA. But she's the one that really kind of runs the show. And what two real things that she had was she shared how the internal structure fuels the client expectations and experience with their firm. The CPAs are the smart guys and women, but the people that work there are really the people that provide the service to the customers, and you've got to build that. And then secondly, she talked about aligning people with a purpose and a process before the final result. So we got a lot of clarity on clarity of action from Christine. So this is a huge thing, and this is one of the main things with the company with Fist Bump, and one of the things that I believe that all of our guests at least share to a little extent, and that is your reputation is the lead engine. Andrew talked about shifting from pitching to showing up as a giver with real credibility. You look at Jeff; he was just providing value. He did these great. I knew nothing about the advertising business, and he did these like 45-second videos on TikTok just on one subject. He did them all walking around. It was highly entertaining and informative. And with Sarah Ann, I really thought what she said was important at the end. She said, "Visuals sell before you speak." And one of the things I got from Sarah Ann, and I always give her credit for this, and she said she shared it with her students when she was a school teacher, is your reputation goes through the door before you do. And I believe all the guests that we've had on the show are good examples of that. So I want you to take this away. Before people care what you do, they care how they believe you can help them. And before that, they want to know, like, and trust you. And once again, appreciate y'all that have watched the show. Next week we got Brandon Lee, the founder of Fist Bump. So I get to do an inquiry to the boss. But Brandon's a brilliant guy and definitely one of the leaders in the field of how to use LinkedIn to build your business, especially for CEOs who need to get their reputation out there. The following week, I believe, is I'm pulling a blank on the following week, but we're booked. Oh, Chris Dunn, who a lot of y'all know if you know us, he is in the trade show business. They do exhibits. Chris has a great story about using LinkedIn and his dog. So, you never know what might work for you. So I appreciate you being on the first 14 shows, being around for the first 14 shows. Again, please share with your friends, share with your peers, and we'll be back here next week at 10 o'clock on Bridging Generations Through Sales and Outreach. And remember, this isn't about starting over. It's about